interesting because we're looking out the window at the Harbor Freeway. On 429 in 1992, my wife and I were driving down the Harbor Freeway, returning from making wedding arrangements because we were getting married that Saturday. And as we were driving south on the Harbor Freeway, we were going through central Los Angeles, and I looked off to my right and I saw a column of smoke. And being a firefighter, I said, oh, some of the local fire stations have a fire. Oblivious to what was going on at the time. And so we went for another minute, and then I saw a second huge column of smoke. And I said, wow, they really have something going, but still unaware that it was the riots. And so we drove all the way home, and as soon as we got home, eventually turned on TV and saw what was going on. And then realized, the magnitude of the event at that time. And so I kind of then anticipated we're all going to be called in. And so shortly after midnight, I get a call to report to our LA Fire Department's central facility. And I reported there, and there I was given an engine company. And so myself and 3 other firefighters assembled our engine, got our equipment. We were looking for bulletproof vests, and they said, we have none. You're going to have to find them. So we set out to the staging area, which was in central LA down on 54th and Arlington. And there was just a mass of fire companies and law enforcement and different agencies there staging in that area. And from there, we then started getting dispatched and sent to different incidents. And so my company never got attached to anyone. So we went everywhere by ourselves, where other fire companies collected together and went out in a group. So we felt a little bit vulnerable and exposed. And so that went into Thursday morning. And on Thursday morning, they sent us from the staging area into downtown. And I'll never forget, as we came into downtown, we turned and started going east on Washington Boulevard. And as soon as we made the turn, Washington Boulevard was a sea of people. There was not a square inch on Washington Boulevard, as far as you could see, that there weren't people. And people were doing all types of things. Some were looting, some were just wandering around, some were running, some were screaming. And as we inched forward down the street, I began to look at the faces. And in the faces, I saw some that had anger in them. Some just had a blank look in their face. Others, they had this wild stare in their eyes. Their eyes were glazed over, and they just weren't who they would be on a normal day. And after seeing that and going through the night's events preceding, it then kind of struck me that I just had this feeling that overcame me that was very unsettling, that any sense of normalcy is gone. Things that we think are rules and behavior are just vanished. And now it was like there's uncertainty that we didn't know what was going to happen at any moment, at any time. And so as we worked our way down Washington Boulevard, getting this very gut feeling of what was happening here, we then pulled into our next assignment. And from there, they sent us actually into Koreatown. And so we were sent, we were actually the first fire department company into Koreatown. We arrived at 8th in Vermont. And when we arrived at that intersection, on the northeast corner was a series of stores, and they were completely engulfed in flames. So we then began to hook up to the hydrant across the street. And as we did that, the streets were, in this place, just vacant. There wasn't a person to be seen. So when these 2 cars lowriders, came south on Vermont toward us. Obviously, I took notice. And what are these two cars doing coming in, following each other and coming very slow? And they pulled up right to the intersection where we were in front of our hydrant. And so I'm looking at them, and within seconds, 8 people, 8 males got out of that car, lined up on the sidewalk in front of us, and began shooting into the stores right behind us. And within seconds, Korean shop owners came out, lined up in front of their store with bullets flying, and began shooting back. And we hit the ground, and there was this little wall that we immediately took cover behind until, we could scurry back to the fire truck to then get out of the area. And so one by one, we took a dash to the fire truck, and then once we were all on board, we then went down the street and came back around the block. And it's funny, years later, we were going through the intersection, and I was telling my wife, "Oh, there's the wall that we were behind." And she hit me, and she said, "That's not a wall. I thought you were behind a tall wall. That wall is this tall. What are you?" And she said she never realize what we were facing at that time. And so we went around the block, and no sooner had we circled the block to come back down, everyone was gone. The cars were gone. The shop owners apparently had gone back into their shops. We saw no bodies, so we didn't know what exactly happened to any of the people involved in the shooting. And so we went back to the corner and then began fighting the fire. And it was another image that I'll remember forever. As we were fighting this fire on this one corner, Vermont and 8th, within 5 minutes, the next block began to burn. And it was almost like in a time sequence. The next 5 minutes, the next block. So within an hour, Vermont Boulevard from where we were all the way to the Santa Monica Freeway was engulfed. And there was this huge, what began as columns of smoke from individual buildings, just turned into this massive smoke covering blanket over all of Vermont. And you would always say that sounds like a war zone. That's what it felt like. And then people started coming out as the fires intensified. And it wasn't until the second day when we were there at 8th and Vermont that we actually saw our first National Guard troop. Prior to that, we had seen no police, we had seen no one. And so when we saw the National Guard troop arrive, and it's kind of, if anyone knows the story about the National Guard, they were rushed in. So the National Guard showed up where we were in a civilian pickup. 3 of them got out, they had their uniforms on, and they had their M16s. And I told them, "Are we glad to see you?" And then they said, "We have no bullets." I said, "Don't worry, you look the part." And so they stood there with no bullets protecting us. Yeah. So as the day went on, that into the evening, at the evening they wanted us to go back downtown. And by this time, we had already heard that a firefighter driving a fire truck had been shot in the head by a passing car. A car had pulled up alongside. The firefighter was driving, and they shot him in the head while he was driving. So, and we were hearing the many other stories about attacks with bottles and rocks on, police, fire, and people in general. So as we were heading down to get back downtown, we had another moment where we knew we were going to encounter barricades. at the intersections. And we had already heard the stories, don't stop at the barricades, because once you do, then they'll come out and attack the vehicle. So as we were heading downtown, toward downtown from Koreatown, we began to encounter the barricades. And so we just drove through the barricades. We had couches and tires flying from hitting the front of the fire truck as we went through the barricades, and rocks and bottles and whatever else began to hit the fire truck as we would go through these intersections. And then finally we made it back into downtown and settled there to take care of the various fires and incidents that were occurring there. So by the time the riots for me were over that Friday, I had a very unsettling feeling. It's like the city, what we know, has completely unraveled. People were not in their normal minds, and things that we always felt were the best things of our city disappeared that day, or those days. And it just left this very deep image and feeling in me for many years of the uncertainty of just the utter chaos and the plight of people that was occurring during those days, during the riots.